Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Steve Knapp, president of the George Washington University, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our Foggy Bottom campus for this two-day conference titled Toward a Global Partnership to Counter Online Radicalization and Extremism. I'd like to extend a special welcome to our distinguished guests from the International Diplomatic Corps, officials of the United States government, including representatives of the Departments of State, Justice, and Homeland Security, and of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, as well as officials from a number of allied governments, and our guests from the technology, internet, and media sectors. This conference was over 2 years in the planning, and in fact, I originally discussed the idea with our distinguished alumna and honorary Dr. Baroness Joanna Shields shortly after she was appointed Minister of Internet Safety and Security for the United Kingdom in May of 2015, and you'll have the privilege of hearing from Baroness Shields in just a few moments. The idea we discussed was to convene a global conference that would bring together a number of governments for a conversation with experts in the field about the challenge of radicalization as a global phenomenon significantly driven by the internet. Of course, this is a timely conversation always, but especially this week in light of the events in London last week. And Baroness, I did have an opportunity to extend to Ambassador Darroch over the weekend our condolences for the tragic events that took place in London just last week. Here at George Washington, I will say the conference builds on the groundbreaking work of our program on extremism in our Center for Cyber and Homeland Security. The program's experts regularly testify on Capitol Hill and are featured in both top academic publications and numerous media outlets. And just last night, some of you may have seen this, Deputy Director Seamus Hughes was interviewed at length on CBS's 60 Minutes. The work of this program and of many others in the field has identified the need for policies that will counter radicalization when it is still in its infancy, and also the need to take fully into account the international scope of the problem. It's my pleasure to welcome the director of the GW program on extremism, Dr. Lorenzo Vidino. Dr. Vidino is an expert on Islamist movements in Europe and North America, whose research focuses on policies countering radicalization, on the mobilization techniques of jihadist networks, and on the activities of Muslim Brotherhood-inspired organizations in the West. He earned a law degree from the University of Milan and a doctorate in international relations from Tufts University's Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. He has held positions at Harvard University's Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs, at the Kennedy School of Government, and at the U.S. Institute of Peace, the RAND Corporation, and the Center for Security Studies at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. In 2016, he was appointed by Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi as coordinator of the National Commission on Jihadist Radicalization. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Lorenzo Vidino.
Thank you, President Knapp, for your very kind words and for entrusting us with the organization of this conference. It's a major honor for us. On behalf of the program on extremism, I would like to welcome you all to this two-day event on countering online extremism and radicalization. Since our start, which was just 2 years ago, we have been working on issues related to this topic. We have been focusing a lot of our attention on ISIS, and we look with attention at all forms of extremism, and have in fact produced a lot of reports also on right-wing extremism and how those groups use the internet. As a lot of the dynamics about online extremism are common among various extremist movements and ideologies. Through our work, we have come to two major conclusions. The first one is that nowadays the internet plays a major role in radicalization processes. We did a study a year and a half ago, which we actually launched here in this very room, about ISIS in America and about the cases of individuals, of Americans who have radicalized and have been arrested for ISIS-related activities. In the 115 cases we have counted so far, there's not a single case where the internet did not play a role. The internet plays a role in all the phases of the radicalization process, from the first encounter that individuals have with the ideology, to when they deepen their knowledge of the ideology, to when they interact with like-minded individuals, all the way to when they plan attacks. And again, the 60 Minutes episode that was showed last night, which featured Seamus, showed a case in which individuals were talking online to people in Syria as they were about to carry out an attack here in the homeland. The second conclusion that we have reached is that the importance of the internet should not be exaggerated. It is not just about the internet. Sometimes you hear narratives that will basically make you think that if we didn't have Facebook or Twitter, there would be no ISIS, there would be no terrorism. And that's obviously nonsense. Radicalization happens in many cases both online and offline. And the interaction between the two spaces is what triggers and causes radicalization in most cases. What we aim to do in our work is to provide balanced and fact-based analysis that is conducive to practical and bipartisan solutions. That is also the spirit that has guided us as we plan for this conference. There are many controversial issues that surround the topic of online radicalization. These are common worldwide. There's a big debate taking place as we speak in the United Kingdom on the aftermath of the London attacks and the tension between the government that seeks access to the WhatsApp conversations of the perpetrator of the attack. That debate is very reminiscent of what we saw a year and a half here in the United States in the aftermath of the San Bernardino attacks, with the FBI making the very same demand. All countries have to deal with issues of privacy, encryption, secrecy, and censorship, balancing many conflicting interests as they do so. All countries are also struggling to find counter-narratives to diminish the appeal of extremist propaganda, another topic we seek to cover in this conference. The best way to go forward in the common goal of confronting extremism is to bring to the same table, in a neutral environment, the key players in this debate, and in particular, the industry and governments. That is exactly what we thought of doing today and tomorrow. You have in front of you the program. And as you can see, we engineered every panel, starting with today's, in a way that includes people from government and the industry. And indeed, I'm very glad to say that we have an amazing array of speakers coming from 3 continents, that includes 2 ministers and many other high-ranking policymakers, senior representatives of the major technology companies, and 3 very prominent journalists who will help us facilitate the conversation. These are hard debates that need to take place both in public and in a more reserved setting. That is why this conference is open to the public, and everything is for attribution. That's a warning to the speakers. It is actually being broadcast as we speak on C-SPAN, and it will also be broadcast on C-SPAN tomorrow. Plus, feel free, and that goes without saying in a conference on social media, to tweet, put it on Facebook, post, do whatever you want to do on social media. We actually have a hashtag, which is POEIES. I repeat, hashtag POEIES. So feel free to disseminate the content of this conversation. At the same time, we have conceived more reserved moments dedicated to more intimate conversations among the stakeholders. In providing this space, we hope we can provide a service to the many policymakers and practitioners and the general public who are interested in the subject. Before introducing our keynote speaker, let me thank a few people. First of all, President Knapp and his staff, Leo Chalupa and the staff at the Office of the Vice President for Research for their support, the law school here at GW, with whom we have the privilege of partnering in organizing this event, and in particular, I want to acknowledge Michael Collins and Don Nunziato. I also want to thank the entire staff at the Program on Extremism. Everybody has been fantastic in coming together and organizing what is a big event for us. And everybody needs to be acknowledged. But I want to particularly mention 3 people, Audrey Alexander, Prachi Vyas, and Alex Hitchens, who have provided and conceived a lot of the panels and a lot of the organization. And a lot of organization goes behind an event like this. So I'm very grateful to all of them. It is now my honor to introduce our keynote speaker for the first day, Baroness Joanna Shields. Baroness Joanna Shields, OBE, is a British-American technology industry veteran and parliamentarian, recently reappointed to her 2nd term as UK Minister for Internet Safety and Security, and Under-Secretary of State by Prime Minister Theresa May. Previously digital advisor to David Cameron, she was made a life peer in 2014. Her responsibilities include combating online extremist recruitment and radicalization, eradicating harmful online crimes, including child abuse, exploitation and cyber hate, and ensuring safe and open access to the internet for everyone. Before joining the government, Joanna spent over 25 years building some of the world's best-known technology companies. She has held senior positions at a number of leading companies, including Google, Facebook, and Bebo. During this time, she was involved, among other things, in helping developing video streaming technology and storage encryption. Joanna served as a non-executive director on several boards, including the London Stock Exchange Group, as a trustee of Save the Children, the NSPCC Therefore Me board, and the American School in London. In May 2016, she was awarded a doctorate in public service, honoris causa, from George Washington University, where she received her MBA in 1987. We are delighted to have her back. So please, if you can join me in welcoming Baroness Shields. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vidino, for that very warm welcome, and of course, Dr. Knapp. It's wonderful to be back here at George Washington University, a place I'm happy to call home. I'd like to thank and congratulate the team here at George Washington University for convening this important gathering to come together to discuss the global partnership to combat extremism online in all of its forms. It is indeed ironic that one of humanity's greatest inventions, its most liberating inventions, the internet, is being misused in this way, as a vessel for violence and hate. But it is no longer a matter of speculation that terrorists and extremists use internet platforms and applications to inspire violence, to spread extremist ideology, and to plan and execute attacks. Each tragic event and incident reconfirms this. Today, we come together following yet another horrific attack, this one in London around the Houses of Parliament, my home and my place of work. 5 people tragically lost their lives. 50 were injured, 30 were hospitalized. The victims came from 12 different countries. And within 24 hours, Daesh claimed responsibility. We know how extremists manipulate information and sow the seeds of discord in our society. And we know how they use propaganda to reinforce grievance, ignite hatred. And we know how they convince people to give up their lives and to join the fight. They target those who are vulnerable, marginalized, invisible, feeling left out. And the pool from which they recruit is expanding exponentially as billions are connected to social networks. Yet, unlike in the physical world, where governments can take clear and firm action to keep people safe and secure in their homes, in their communities, the virtual space is a different domain. It's the domain of commercial companies, and we must rely on them and their cooperation and support to keep people from harm. If we are to protect human life in this ever more connected world, we need a new model of shared responsibility. And this is the conversation I would like to have with you today. I would like to challenge our thinking and ask how we move from reacting to crisis and incidents to prevention and full acceptance of responsibility on all sides. In Western societies, we hold sacred democratic values: our freedom of speech, our right to privacy, the rule of law, safety and security. These values apply to the internet as well, which we all believe must be free, open, and accessible. But there's growing public sentiment that not enough is being done to tackle extremist use of the internet. And when it comes to the question of what to do about it, we are at an impasse. The voices of consumers and brands are loud and clear, and the recent exodus of top advertisers from social media platforms sends the strongest possible message that their products and services must not be promoted next to deplorable extremist content. And recently, Germany proposed legislation that sets out binding new standards for how social networking companies should delete criminal content. The challenge with this approach, however, is that regulation creates a new set of national rules for these businesses, which are by definition global and borderless. And there is significant complexity around any regime that governs online activity, not least keeping up with the obligation current given the speed and evolution of technology and the extraterritorial jurisdiction that applies. So, we are at a critical moment when united action to tackle this threat is the only way forward. Governments and experts can provide extensive knowledge and rigorous understanding of the threat, but industry is best placed to innovate on technical solutions that address this threat specifically on their commercial platforms. They must innovate and automate their response to identifying and removing this vile, hateful material, so that together we can ensure that everything possible is done to stop it from infiltrating and poisoning the global audience. And increasingly, we see a potent cycle of hate across multiple groups and ideologies, as all sides of the extremist spectrum feed off each other, escalating tensions. We saw this post the London attack when this image appeared. The photographer who took this picture said he posted it because it showed a young woman wearing a hijab who was traumatized by the events around her. But this was not how she was portrayed on social media. The image was wildly misappropriated by right-wing groups as representing her as insensitive and indifferent to the carnage that was unfolding around her. The growing audacity of all types of extremist groups is perpetuating this vicious cycle. The far right asserts that Islam represents an existential threat to the West, stating that all Muslims are supportive of terrorism. We have seen this in terms of memes such as refugees that they use on social media, which stigmatize those who are fleeing the atrocities in the Middle East. The far right is using groups like Daesh as an opportunity to frighten, sow division in communities, and make their extremist narratives more palatable. Social networks algorithmically connect like-minded individuals, and they amplify their passions. This is at the core of the online advertising business model. But these connections can channel people into echo chambers where highly emotive and passionate content, amplified by these algorithms, reinforces extremist messaging. This creates an illusion of strength in numbers, when in fact these views are in fact fringe. Over the past year, we've seen new developments, such as the use of social media live during attacks, that complicates disruption efforts. Terrorists document their unspeakable actions, and they bask in a nihilistic, personal moment of fame and notoriety. Furthermore, the footage is later released and used in instructional videos to inspire and incite more violence, perpetuating a vicious cycle. The precedent for real-time sharing during a terrorist attack was tragically set in 2016 in the broadcast of a French policeman and his wife's murder on social media, while their little boy looked on in horror. We saw this used again a few weeks ago during a horrific attack in Kabul on a military hospital, where the attackers posted live photos as the event was unfolding. Terrorist use of the internet as a sphere of influence will continue to evolve and adapt, and we need new methods to quickly identify and remove terrorist content, and to deliver more effective counter-narrative campaigns. And we must be evidence-based. Too often we are reactionary, and we do not adequately deal with the complexities that are faced. Daesh in particular produces material designed to capitalize on community tensions and hostility towards Muslims in the West. This further isolates groups away from mainstream society. Their message is that every Muslim has a duty to fight, that jihad is in fact local as well as global, and that if they're unable to travel, they are legitimate targets that they can execute in their home countries. Following the attack on Berlin's Christmas market in December, Daesh released a statement on Telegram in Arabic, French, and English, encouraging their supporters to carry out lone actor attacks in the West during the holiday period, specifically advising supporters to target celebrations, clubs, hospitals, markets, and movie theaters. Tragically, This foretold the Reyna nightclub attack in Istanbul on New Year's Eve. We have seen this type of call before. Last year, the then spokesman, Abu Muhammad al-Adnani, called for the group's supporters to carry out terrorist attacks during Ramadan. At the time, analysts regarded this call as less persuasive than his previous fatwas. But in fact, it proved deadly. It was the bloodiest Ramadan this century. Other emergent narrative themes in Daesh propaganda include the total rejection of LGBTQ communities and a hatred of nationalism and secularism, which have been cited as a motivation for the attack on the Pulse nightclub in Orlando and the lorry attack in Nice on Bastille Day. This directional shift in Daesh's official online publications is well known. This image on the left of the screen shows its Dabiq magazine, which encouraged supporters to embrace the caliphate and come to build a new state. The second shows its newer publication, Rumiyah, which calls on its followers to carry out acts of terrorism wherever they live, whenever they can, reflecting the new reality of its survival as an ideology. Let me illustrate some of the atrocities that Rumiyah has inspired, as each edition contains graphic instructional videos. The second edition called for lone actor attacks using knives, with a full demonstration on a frightened hostage. This was replicated in the heinous murder of a French priest in Normandy, and attacks in the Minnesota shopping mall last year. The third edition of Rumiyah advised its supporters to carry out vehicle-based lone actor attacks, praising the Bastille Day attack in Nice, and replicated in Berlin, and also here in the United States at Ohio State University. Recently, a scene showing how to build a shrapnel-filled IED in a kitchen was disseminated. More than 100 links to this video were posted across 29 platforms within 1 hour. This was organized on Telegram, distributed on Twitter, and the video was hosted on YouTube, Archive, SendVid, and Google Drive. Part of the terrorist ecosystem used by Daesh to ensure their propaganda has maximum impact. 24 hours after the video's release, despite best efforts, half of these links were still active. We should not be fooled by Daesh's ability to produce and distribute propaganda, or that Daesh's ability to produce and distribute propaganda will decrease as its military losses mount. According to research the UK government has undertaken, as Daesh have been degraded and defeated and their infrastructure compromised on the ground, its unofficial brand ambassadors have become prominent distributors of its propaganda. These devotees critically create their own material, which they promote and discuss across networks. Idolization of lone actor terrorists and martyrs for the cause feeds an increasing audacity in attacks and offers the members a chance to gain fame, glory, and status. We now see other terrorist groups mimicking Daesh's online attacks with devastating consequences. In fact, we see an escalating competitive dynamic among terrorist groups. It's a savage game of one-upsmanship. In the past few weeks, we've seen the Syrian al-Qaeda-linked franchise, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, launch a magazine called Al-Aba. It's a professional media brand that it uses now for online communications and videos. In mid-March, they released their first English-language statement, rebuking the U.S. for its selfish policy in Syria. And the quantity and quality of Daesh's output, while it's still starting to fluctuate, we mustn't lose sight of other extremist groups seeking to increase their online presence. In the UK, a neo-Nazi group called National Action was proscribed recently for glorifying terrorism, having built up a fan base through the use of explicitly youth-oriented material to reach new recruits. The ability for other terrorist groups' propaganda to incite violence and attacks is no longer theoretical, as evidenced by the brutal murder of a member of Parliament, Joe Cox, last summer. The threat we face continues to grow. We must develop and rapidly deliver an ever stronger response at pace and scale. Now, some progress has been made. In the UK, we've developed a world-leading approach to tackling terrorist and violent extremist use of the internet that focuses on two areas of work. We work with industry to voluntarily remove extremist content online through the Counterterrorism Internet Referral Unit. We bring communication experts and civil society groups together to develop and run targeted and effective counter-messaging campaigns that provide compelling alternative voices to this extremist rhetoric. Working together with industry in 2016, the UK's Counterterrorism Internet Referral Unit, run by our Metropolitan Police Department, secured the removal of over 120,000 pieces of terrorist and extremist content. We supported the setting up of this model in the EU, working with our partners, and their unit launched in 2015 in July, which also works to secure the removal of content in a wider range of languages. This unit has reported a successful statistic of 90% of their referrals to industry have been removed. Following the Paris attacks, Telegram acted swiftly to suspend the account of 78 public channels that were used by Daesh and its supporters in 12 languages. Telegram recently responded to a UK request to remove English language Daesh propaganda. And last year we saw leading internet companies come together in December in a proposal to build a shared hash database of terrorist content at the EU Internet Forum. So this looks like progress, right? But it's also, in many cases, a little bit too little, too late. By the time we react, research shows that terrorists have already reached their audience. UK government research shows that the majority of those links to terrorist content are shared within the first 2 hours of release. And they also anticipate takedowns and suspensions, and they instruct their supporters to return to the open internet with strategies to reassemble, reconfigure, and be back online. This must change. We need a new approach, a new partnership. Excuse me. Governments across the world are agitating. They're looking at legislation to force more timely removal of content by social media companies. This is reinforced by fines and other sanctions. I do not believe that this approach alone will succeed. It is incumbent upon industry to drive this change. They must build new capacity that is holistic, targeted, and dynamic to address these threats and reclaim their platforms from those who seek to exploit them, to incite violence or push dogma and repression. Finally, in the terms and conditions that govern these sites, these are based on corporate philosophies, values, and beliefs that surely the goalposts can be moved. While violent extremist groups seek to undermine the very ideals and values that the internet was established to advance, we must reinforce its capability to be the answer to hatred and intolerance, rather than a vehicle for it. We must understand that the influence of terror groups online, and we must deploy the use of strong data analytics to recognize how terrorists amplify their messages and decipher the patterns of their deadly actions. And in terms of technology, we need to improve solutions that classify the language of terrorism, automate its identification and removal, and create tools that better tackle automated bots and other techniques that support these propaganda machines. In essence, we must take a stance in solidarity against terrorism, solidarity across governments, industries, and people all around the world. The internet is universal, and it is imperative that developers consider these dangers alongside other internet harms. And we must empower the global community with better tools to respond and report harmful content, to speak out and to take action. Every person has the ability to recognize bias, hatred, and intolerance and say, no, not on my profile, not in my name. We can't let the world retreat to a dark place of ignorance and prejudice. We must stand up for what we believe in: freedom, peace, democracy, understanding, and inclusivity. A world in which knowledge, debate, and discussion bring people closer together and make them feel part of something that's greater than themselves. To close, I would like to leave you with a quote from Prime Minister Theresa May the day following the London attack. She said, "Yesterday, we saw the worst of humanity, but we will remember the best." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Baroness Shields. I know this is a bit straining on your vocal cords. I understand you, you had some issues with that, but these are very powerful words. So thank you very much for your speech today. We have now a break. We have a coffee break in the lobby upstairs. So if you just walk out the room, then walk up the stairs one flight up. And we have a coffee break, which lasts more or less half an hour. I would urge you to come back at 4:15 sharp, as at 4:20 we have the first panel. Thank you.